All right, good evening, everybody. My name's Adam White, and you get the cameras set up, and then all of a sudden you go live, and the camera is different than it was in the preview. Anyway, my name's Adam White. I'm Government Legislative Affairs with the Alaska Airmen's Association, and it is 6 p.m. Alaska time on the third Tuesday of the month, and you know what time that is. It's time for the Government Legislative Affairs update, and apologize for the sound of my voice. I have picked up some kind of chest cold here in the past day or so, and so it makes it sound like I'm, Barry White or something instead of Adam White. So looks like Instagram is reconnecting. There we go. So you may hear another form of transportation in the background. Most of you know that I live in Nenana, and I do these updates here in the hangar at the airport in Nenana, but yep, there goes the train. The train comes through Nenana on a regular basis, and at 6 o'clock during the summer is the passenger train. So we got a lot of tourists coming through town right now, and the railroad wants everybody to know they're here. So apologize for the sound of the train there in the background. So a few things we want to talk about this evening. I don't want to keep you too long. Not sure how long my voice is going to hold out. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right to it. If you do have any questions or comments, I encourage you to put those here in the chat. I try my best to go through and see those as they scroll through the screen and deal with them as they pop up. FAA reauthorization. It's hot and heavy in the House right now. There's been a couple of amendments that have been submitted. Some of them have not been accepted. Some of them are still being debated. But FAA reauthorization is definitely in the works. There's a lot of encouraging things in the FAA reauthorization bill in both the House and the Senate version that are very good for Alaska. So if you are curious to know more about that, I would, you can reach out to me and I can give you the highlights. There's a lot of things there that we could talk about, but I don't want to take up a lot of your time for that. Other than to say, we need to encourage Peltoa, our representative, to vote in favor of House Resolution 3935, which is the FAA reauthorization bill, and make sure that that passes the House. And then once the Senate picks that up, we'll be dealing with Murkowski and Sullivan on that. Had an opportunity to speak to Senator Sullivan on Saturday as he came through Nenana for the 100th anniversary of the Alaska Railroad. So we were able to chat a little bit about some aviation things while he was here. And we talked about FAA reauthorization, and he's very excited about the things that it's doing for us here in Alaska, the things that are written into the Senate version of the bill and that are also in the House version of the bill. So, good chance that we could come out looking pretty good in the FAA reauthorization here by the end of the summer. September is the time frame to get that passed through both the House and the Senate in order for the President to sign it. If you haven't read this edition of the transponder, I just got my copy yesterday, and if I've gotten my copy, chances are you've gotten yours because I'm at the end of the alphabet. So a lot of good articles in there. I'll talk about some things in my normal update there, but one of the things I've mentioned in that update is the difficulties we are having with Customs and Border Protection and their limited hours of operation. So if you've run into a situation dealing with Customs and Border Protection with their limited hours of operation, please let me know about that. I am building a lot of data points, and we most likely are going to have to go to the congressional level to be able to fix this because it is a budget issue. I have dealt with it enough to know and understand that that's what it is. It's not that Customs and Border Protection doesn't want to do their job. It's not that they are looking for ways to keep aviation out of Alaska. None of those things are the case. They simply don't have the staff. They don't have the funding for more staff, and they don't have unlimited funds for overtime. And so that's why the hours of operation that we've been hearing about, that's why that's an issue. Now, it is a safety concern for hours, for us here at the Alaska Airmen's Association, and for general aviation as a whole. When you can only clear customs 2 separate times at Northway, 8 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, plus or minus there, and then during business hours in Fairbanks or even in Anchorage. Outside of those times, you have to get prior approval, And if you try to do that outside those times in Northway, you're not going to be granted that approval, and chances are you won't be granted in Fairbanks or Anchorage either. And again, it's a budget issue. They just don't have the money to pay for the overtime. And it's not just the time that the agent would be there. There's a minimum time that they have to pay for overtime if they call an officer back in to work. And so it's not just, if they were only there for 20 minutes, they only get paid 20 minutes overtime. That's not the way that works. I think most people understand that. So if you have an experience with Customs and Border Protection here in the recent past, this year or last year, and if it's, past COVID, if it's post-COVID, I'd like to hear about it. Good, bad, or indifferent. Again, we're trying to build a case and a data point to be able to take a proposal to the congressional delegation to see what we can do to help with the budget so that we can come and go from the state of Alaska. So, speaking of the great state of Alaska, weather obviously plays a big part in our ability to fly around. And if you haven't known this already, but the Alaska Weather TV program was on the air for, I think, 47 years, if I'm remembering right. I could be off on that number, but that number sticks out in my mind. It is no longer being broadcast over television, over-the-air television. Public TV in Anchorage was broadcasting that, and again, due to budget constraints, they said they could no longer do that unless the Weather Service came up with the money to fund that operation. Weather Service couldn't do that. A lot of reasons why. Primarily, it just wasn't there. It wasn't available. And the process in order for them to do that in the budget, they needed more time. So what's happened is now you no longer are able to watch Alaska Weather, which has a general segment, had an aviation segment, and had a marine segment. That is no longer available on the TV. Now, you can watch it on YouTube. It was also available on YouTube prior to the 1st of July, but now they have moved to their own YouTube channel, and National Weather Service Alaska, NWS Alaska. So if you search on YouTube for Alaska Weather, NWS Alaska, that channel will pop up. Now, what they've done is they've broken those three segments that had been spliced together into one program with a little bit of a break, with a lot of great content to fill up a 30-minute segment. They now have kept those three segments separated. And those are available on their YouTube channel. And you can go and you can watch the general segment just by itself. You can watch the aviation segment by itself. And if you're interested in the marine segment, you can watch it. Now, some of us may think that, hey, that's actually great. I don't really need the marine forecast. And a lot of the things they talk about in a general forecast, I don't really need that. So I can go look and watch and see exactly what information that I want. And that's true to a large extent. Now, I will tell you that based on some feedback, I had a conversation with Carrie Hazley last week, who is part of the media part of National Weather Service Alaska. And we were talking about this issue along with some other folks in industry, and offered some feedback and some ideas. And they've been very responsive to that, including a general conversation at the beginning of the aviation segment, and I believe also at the beginning of the marine segment. The problem comes in, though, that some of the graphics that they use in the general segment are not available when they record the aviation and the marine segments. And so there was talk about when does that program need to be released, what time of day, availability of those graphics, and how important are those. I think the programs I've been watching in the past week, they've been pulling up a satellite image, or they've been talking about in the IFR, VFR chart where the weather systems are and why those things are happening. So a little bit more of a general conversation is happening. But here's the deal. A lot of us have access to the internet. If you're watching this right now, you have access to the internet. There are a lot of folks in Alaska that still do not have access to fast enough internet to be able to access these YouTube feeds. And that's a problem. I know that a lot of us do fly in remote parts of the state, and I will admit, years ago, my children grew up watching Reuben Eaton III on Alaska TV, on Alaska Weather, and because that's what I did every night. I watched Alaska Weather, keep up with what was happening around the state weather-wise. And when I'm flying around even today and spend the night in a remote location and don't have access to good, fast internet, I would watch Alaska weather on the TV feed. There are still folks that do not have a consistent, reliable, fast enough internet connection, and so the YouTube feed is not a viable option for them. So, National Weather Service has an obligation to provide that information to the general public, and when their distribution method essentially is not available to a segment of the population, they're concerned about that, and I appreciate that concern. And so now we have to figure out what we can do to help with that. And so there's some opportunities for feedback. If you look in this edition of the transponder, I give an email address there that you can submit some comments to. You can also go to that YouTube channel, and there's information there about where you can send those comments. So I encourage you to do that. They need feedback. They need to know how this is impacting folks. And maybe you should look at that YouTube feed. If you haven't been watching Alaska weather, maybe you should start. It's a great format, 5 to 7 minutes. Great general overview of the weather for the next day ahead, and talking about past conditions, IFR, VFR, all those things. Great way to keep on top of what the weather picture is around the state of Alaska. So I encourage you to go look at that, go watch it, subscribe to that channel, and tell your friends about it. All right. So something else that I mentioned, and let me pull up this piece of paper here so I can have here for you to see it. This advisory circular. So read this, please. Read it. AC 90-66 Charlie, non-tower airport flight operations. If you have not read this updated advisory circular, which was just updated last month, June 6th of this year, there's some good stuff in there. I wrote a specific article in this edition of the transponder from the safety committee about this, giving some highlights and some points there. I encourage you to read that article. If you do not have a hard copy of the transponder, it will be available on our website in the coming days if it's not already up and available. So please read it. I talk about in that article some of the things that are mentioned in this advisory circular that I have heard on the radio that disappoint me when I hear them. Some things that I hear on the radio that kind of make me just want to cringe when I hear it on the radio. And then there's things that we all have heard on the radio that you just kind of scratch your head and go, what in the world are they thinking by saying it that way? Now, I have been guilty of some of the things that are talked about in this advisory circular. And when you read this, you're going to find that you also are guilty, most likely, of some of the things that are talked about in that advisory circular. So please make an effort to go through and read that and see if you can't learn and improve your airmanship. Remember, a good pilot is always learning, and we're always taking correction and opportunities to learn. And I think a lot of us have realized that maybe we learned some things early on in our pilot career, whether it's a professional career or a recreational hobby that we have as aviators, that we don't do those things that way anymore because we have learned better. So I encourage you to do that. All right. Something else that's happening. There is a study right now. There's actually an evaluation, and I'm looking at a separate set of notes here, but the FAA, along with the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with the Lincoln Lab, are developing a cloud estimation tool using image analytics. They're developing an algorithm to look at weather camera images to estimate ceilings, not ceilings, but clouds, whether it's scattered, broken, few, overcast, those descriptive terms there. And there's an evaluation period that's going on right now through the end of August. And if you're interested in participating in that, they're looking for about 20 people to be able to participate in this study and this evaluation of their product and their algorithm. I actually had an interview yesterday. I am participating in that process. Really cool stuff. Really cool to take the weather camera images that we all rely on, that we all look at, that we all are so grateful to have, And when a weather camera site goes down, we don't like that. But what this algorithm is going to do, and is already doing, is looking to see if they can determine with some very good accuracy what the clouds are. Again, few, scattered, broken, overcast, are clear. And so some great possibilities of what that may turn into at some point down the road in the future. So if you want to know more information about that, I encourage you to send me a message through the social media platform that you may be watching this on, whether it's YouTube in the next day or so, or Instagram and Facebook Live as we do this, or you can send me an email to adam.white, W-H-I-T-E, at alaskaairmen.org. You can also go on our website, alaskaairmen.org, and find my contact information there, and I'll be glad to forward you the information you need to be able to participate in that evaluation. Okay, so it is summer, and a lot of folks are flying on floats, and we haven't talked about this in a while, a couple of seasons, but invasive species. There's some reports that Alodia has been found at 6 Mile Lake in Anchorage, there on J-Bear, the float pond there at 6 Mile Lake. And Fish and Wildlife Service, Federal Fish and Wildlife, are in control of that body of water since it's on a military installation. And they are right now going through the process to figure out an eradication plan. But here's the thing. If you don't know what Alodia is, do a search on the internet and find out about Alodia. It is incredibly invasive. It chokes off waterways. It kills fish. It jams up your water rudders and all the cables there on your floats. It's a hazard. Float planes have the ability to transfer Alodia from one body of water to another. So there's some best practices to consider. Cycle your water rudders after you take off to make sure you get all the weeds off. Whether it's Alodia or not, you should probably be doing that already. If you land in a body of water that's full of weeds, avoid the weed patches as much as possible. Now, sometimes I understand that's impossible to do, but think about how you operate on bodies of water when there's aquatic weeds in that water. We do not want to have Alodia spread any further than it already is, because it is a bad thing. Not exaggeration here. It totally will kill a lake because it just, it kills the ability for the fish to have beds to spawn in, all the oxygen, all the things that happen when a weed totally clogs up a body of water. So now we get to hear a helicopter come right over the top of the hangar, and I'll admit that sounds better than a train to me. Sounds like an R-44. So anyway, those are the things that I had on my list. I haven't seen anything pop up as far as comments as we've been going through. A lot of people checking in. It's good to see those folks checking in online as we go back and forth with the social media updates. Appreciate you tuning in and watching these things, and of course, if you don't see them live, they are available on these social media platforms after the fact, and they're archived on YouTube, on the Alaska Airmen's YouTube channel. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight before my voice totally goes away, and I want to say thank you for tuning in, joining me this week, this month, and we'll do it again next month. See you then.